Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the session of Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee. We have two items today. Our third item, a bill we were looking at regarding the naming of public facilities, will be discussed at a later time. Members of this committee will be attending the funeral services for Master Firefighter Higgins later today, so we will take up the two items before us. The first is a work session on spending affordability guidelines for the amended FY 25-30 capital improvement program. This is a work session for the committee to review this, and then we will prepare our recommendations for a council review on February 4th, which is the deadline for the council either to confirm or amend the guidelines. So our job is to send a recommendation to the full committee after hearing from the staff today. So I will turn it over to the staff to walk us through the packet.
Okay, good morning. Just to note, our executive branch representative is running a few minutes late, Ms. Rachel Silverman, so she'll be here shortly. But we can get started, and we do have a presentation we can go through that will summarize our recommendations and issues. Pull that up. Go to the next slide, the agenda. So yes, today we are reviewing the process and considerations of the committee in setting the CIP SAG for this upcoming year. We'll be reviewing the updated assumptions and inputs prepared by Department of Finance and the executive branch, and we'll also be reviewing some of the recent data on debt indicators and changes since last February, or rather 2 years ago, when we had the last full review of a SAG. Next slide, please. So the considerations for the committee is an emphasis on what the county can afford, not necessarily what it needs in terms of expenditures. This is based on a variety of metrics and inputs. We will go through those trends and estimates of future macroeconomic activities impacting the county's financial capacity in the CIP. Next slide, please. In terms of process, the council must approve, with a simple majority of 6 votes, a SAG for the CIP by the first Tuesday in every October. This is typically done in a full CIP year, and so the last approved SAG was October 3rd, 2023. In an off year, council has an opportunity to revise the SAG by the first Tuesday in February of each year. So there's an annual review at minimum. The revision is limited to no more than a 10% increase in each of year 1 and 2 of the previously set SAG if there is a significant change in economic conditions. The council can revise years 3 to 6 as well as the 6-year total without any limitation. After February and in mid-May, as part of the final action and reconciliation of the next year's capital budget, the council with 8 votes can exceed the guidelines for years 1 and or 2 or the 6-year total without limitation. Next slide, please. Okay. This chart before you shows some of the recent CIPs that were approved by the council. The most recent recommended CIP that the executive transmitted last week is on the last row. You'll see over the last 4 CIPs, including this year's recommended CIP, the SAG limit has been $280 million of GO bonds each year, in each of the 6 years, for a total of $1.68 billion. This has been held pretty steady. It's a reduction from prior to 4 years ago when we had higher SAG numbers for each of the 6 years. Next slide. This chart before you shows some of the key assumptions that the Department of Finance uses in its debt capacity indicators, which I'll cover in a few slides. These are the main inputs. There are 6 main inputs. This is a comparison between the inputs that were prepared for this month for this recommended CIP compared to last year's CIP as well. And so you'll see, I'll highlight the changes. Interest rate on bonds has not changed from last year. They are assumed to be 5% a year. The operating budget growth has been revised upwards in the first year of FY 25 to 5.8%. Remaining years fluctuate, but are a little lower in some years, such as FY 28, FY 29, and a little higher in some years, such as FY 30 and FY 27. The population growth numbers estimates have been revised downwards across all 6 years, reflecting more recent data. The inflation numbers have been increased upward, fluctuate, but are generally close to last year's estimates. The assessable base, property tax base for the county has been increased upwards in all 6 years, reflecting recent property market in the county. And finally, personal income has been revised lower in year one, FY25, but has been revised upwards slightly across all the remaining 5 years. And again, these inputs are driving the debt capacity indicators, which will go into the next slide. Okay, there are 5 key debt indicators that the Department of Finance and the executive branch uses to determine, that the council should use to determine whether or not to change the SAG limit. The first indicator is that the total debt should not exceed 1.5% of full market value of taxable real property. The second indicator is the sum of debt service and long-term and short-term lease payments should not exceed 10% of general fund revenue. The third indicator is that real debt per capita should not exceed $1,000 by a significant amount. The fourth indicator is the ratio of debt to total personal income shall not exceed 3.5%. And finally, the last indicator is that 60 to 75% of outstanding debt at the beginning of any period should be paid off within 10 years. Next slide. Again, this is the first indicator, and this chart shows where we currently are in terms of the projection versus where we were last year and the year before. And so you'll see with the guideline at 1.5%, we are trending downwards in the most recent projections. We're above the guideline in we were above the guideline in FY24. In 25, we're projected to end above the guideline, and in 26, we're right about at the guideline, with us finally dipping under the guideline in 27, 28, 29, and 30. So overall, we are showing improvement over past year's projections, and we are heading in the right direction in terms of this indicator. Next slide. With respect to this indicator, we remain above the guideline in all 6 years of the CIP period. However, the most recent projections are showing improvements as well as a downward trend, getting close to the 10% guideline by FY30 at 10.21%. But the real debt per capita guideline is $2,400. We remain above the guideline across all 6 years. There are some fluctuations, but generally we are trending downwards by FY30 as well with this indicator. In terms of the fourth indicator, we remain below the guideline, which is good. And again, we are showing a downward trend across all 6 years. And finally, the payout ratio, we're roughly within the guidelines, between 60 and 75% across all 6 years, a little bit above, but with some fluctuation, but generally at the upper limit across all 6 years. So finally, that's it. In terms of the indicators, Council staff's recommendation is based on the indicators, and despite the improvements we're projecting, we do recommend that we stay within the current SAG limit for this upcoming CIP. We will have a chance to review updated indicators and inputs next fall in September of 2025, and we'll see where we are at that point in time. But for the time being, we are recommending to stay the course.
Great. Ms. Lanchenko, anything to add?
Just to note that with the executive's recommendation last week, he was supportive of the current spending affordability guidelines. That's not always been the case. So this time around, right now we have a consistent SAG issue between the council and the executive going forward. That's another reason why I think staff are supportive of the SAG guidelines as they are now.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Silverman, thank you for joining us this morning. Before I turn to my colleagues, I just had 2 questions just to thank you for that presentation. While we have everyone here today on page 5 and 6 of the packet, just to go over the set aside that is discussed on page 5 and the change that we see, I think it's in FY 26, just to make sure that folks who are reading the packet and following at home, why we see that change there and the change in PAYGO for FY 25. If we could just review that.
Sure, yeah. There is a 10% policy goal of PAYGO to bonds planned for issue. Even with this reduction that the executive is recommending in his package that came over last week, he's still at or above that 10% minimum. Certainly that's something the council can consider going forward as to whether it wants to restore that pay-go. The executive was able to find sufficient resources in the CIP without it, and that frees up dollars that can be considered for the operating budget. On the other hand, of course, the council can revisit that and consider whatever level of pay-go it would like above that 10%.
Okay. That is very helpful. I think in some conversations and some of the statements that have been made regarding the CIP and the changes we made to impact taxes this fall, I'm not sure we've been highlighting the change to the pay-go and the flexibility we may have as we look at this whole thing. So thank you for highlighting that. Can you also just talk about the set-aside and the change there? Again, just for folks able to look at that and to see what that is, what the set-aside is for this year, or for FY26, excuse me.
Yeah, each CIP cycle, we build in a set-aside for the CIP, recognizing that costs will increase in projects. There will be unexpected costs going forward. And of course, as you go out each year in the CIP, it becomes far less certain what will happen over time. So you need a set-aside that gradually ramps up. Usually in the first year of the CIP, it may be in the $10 to $15 million range. But by the end of the CIP, you're looking at something much higher because we just don't have, we know the CIP is not fully programmed in the later years. So that's a baseline and an assumption that has been in place for many, many, many years. The executive set aside this year is marginally increased overall. Part of that is to deal with some state aid uncertainty with MCPS, and when that uncertainty is resolved, then that set aside could be applied appropriately to the MCPS CIP. So part of it is reserved for that. But we'll be looking more at the set aside as we go through the budget process, and at reconciliation in May, the council will be responsible for sort of that balancing act of how much the set aside should be versus any marginal adjustments that need to be made to the CIP at that point.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Just wanted to get those 2 points out there before we move on to discussing the CIP in greater detail in the upcoming months. Any colleagues have anything? No? I think we're good. Are we good moving forward recommending we stay the course on the spending affordability guidelines to our colleagues? Yes, we are. So we are done with our first item. Thank you very much. Our next item is looking at Expedited Bill 22-24, Taxation Collection of Development Impact Taxes. And I will, Ms. Nadeau is coming up to join us, and I will let her walk through the packet. And I know we have folks from OMB here and Finance to help us answer any questions we might have regarding this.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Okay, so Bill 2224. I'll start with what the bill will do. So this is an expedited bill that will strike provisions in the current code about impact taxes. Currently, you can defer payment 6 or 12 months, depending on the type of building. What the bill will do is not require payment until final inspection, regardless of the building type. So going through the packet, I'll start with the public hearing. There was a lot of varied testimony from individuals, housing advocates, I believe 3 of the chambers of commerce, and then private land use attorneys representing developers. Most of the testimony was in support and noted that the bill would encourage development because it reduces the costs, and also some testimony that it would increase housing stock. There was testimony noting a concern with the delay in the collection due to a cash flow issue, which I will get to in a minute, that requested the council consider ways to mitigate this issue, specifically with respect to schools. So I guess that was a quick segue for the fiscal impact statement. So OMB did note that DPS doesn't anticipate a significant impact on operations or revenues, because what's happening in this bill is the payments are the same and still going to be collected. They're just delayed. But OMB did note that they had used a random number generator based on parameters provided by DPS, and that based on that, there is the 6-year loss would be about $14.8 million for schools and $13 million for transportation impact taxes over that 6-year period. So I put a screenshot of that forecast in the packet on page 2. I'll note here the county executive did also submit a letter expressing concerns about the fiscal impact and asking for this bill to be delayed until after the work group that was discussed by this committee last year. As noted, we do have representatives here from Finance, DPS, and OMB to answer any questions about this fiscal impact statement, notably any information the committee has about the methodology used and what parameters were used for that random number generator. So I will pause there in case of questions.
Great. I think there were a number of questions asked in the packet that you just highlighted regarding the methodology. I don't know if folks want to speak to that. Who's the best person? Ms. Silverman?
Good
morning.
Todd Foley from Finance is the best to speak to the details.
Good morning. Todd Foley, Financial Analyst, Department of Finance. The methodology for doing the analysis involves looking at the past developments as a proxy for the future, because we have extreme difficulty in forecasting where, what, and how much of anything will be built. And then when you flow that into our specific impact tax system, which involves 4 geographies, over 15 different types of development, each one of those has a different rate associated with it, it becomes near impossible to figure out exactly in each year what will be built, exactly how much will occur. So the way that we go about estimating the future is to look at the past as a proxy for what and where will get built. The methodology here, we asked of DPS when final permits are received and when final inspection, when impact taxes are paid currently, and when the final inspection occurs. And they were able to provide us with a range on the type, for example, between a 1-year and 2-year gap for non-residential and between a 6-month and 1-year gap for residential projects. Those are the parameters. We do not have, and because we do not have the exact dates for the past projects as to when they had those final permits, but we do have exactly when they paid their impact taxes, we chose to use a random number generator within that parameter to every single payment that DPS received over the past 10 years. It is about 16,000 records that we're working with. And we're basically simulating when would each payment have been received had the policy gone into effect that specific year, fiscal year, that the project paid its impact taxes. We then sort of add everything up. When did they pay? When would they have paid in this alternate world in which this policy went into effect, specifically in the fiscal year in which they were paying their impact taxes, and compare the differences. So we do it for each of 6 years for which we have sort of the complete record, if you will, and then sum it up. And what you get is the impact taxes go down by sort of the percentages that we show in the chart in the packet, by that average amount across sort of the 6 years where we have the full record. And we apply that to our future as an estimate of how our future revenues will change based on that cash flow valley, if you will, in the year that this is implemented.
Thank you for that detailed description. Just on the methodology, do my colleagues have any questions on that? No? Thank you very much. Ms. Ndu, you want to continue going through the packet?
Sure. So next up is the economic impact statement, which is somewhat related. So that's done by OLO. And OLO found that by allowing impact tax payments to be made later, then the financing costs would go down for the development projects. This is something that's been discussed a lot with this bill. The economic impact statement breaks down why very nicely. Basically what happens is a developer has several financing costs, including interest fees and other costs associated that they have to borrow money for. So the reason it's a positive impact, economic impact statement is if you delay that payment, then they reduce the total amount of equity that they need to finance a project. And then it shortens the interest periods and then can decrease the cost of development overall. So the intent with this bill from the sponsor was by reducing that, we might generate more projects and reduce some of the burdens. Something that was noted in testimony as well was that that might also mean that projects can pencil out a little faster and then increase housing stock. So that's the economic impact statement, which did note that, of course, with all impact statements, we never know exactly how many will be built. So we can't get into the exact numbers of exactly how many more or less projects. But overall, it was a positive impact statement.
Great. I think Councilmember Friedson has a question on this one.
Yeah, it's more of a comment, but this directly ties to the previous conversation. I think there's a misconception that time isn't money, but time is money. And that's the argument that the fiscal impact statement is making, that the time is money for the county government. If we're deferring payment and we're not receiving the revenues, then those funds will not be available at the time in which perhaps they're needed. But the inverse of that is that time is also money for the private sector. And by allowing more flexibility, we may be allowing more projects to pencil out, which could be more housing, more investment, more of the things that we want. This is the central rub of many of the decisions that we make. It's one of the reasons why I think it's so important that we have a fiscal impact statement and an economic impact statement, and why I champion that effort as one of the first major bills that I put forward when I joined the council 6.5 years ago. This is the whole point, this question. So in terms of that methodology, it's two sides of the same exact coin, but by providing flexibility to the private sector, we are, on the receiving end of that flexibility in the public sector. And the central question here is whether or not it's worth it, whether or not we think that incentivizing, providing a little bit more flexibility, perhaps seeing some more projects move forward and be able to pencil out is worth delaying the time at which we would receive the funds in the public sector to pursue our shared public priorities. So I just think, the two conversations happen sequentially, but really they're the same exact conversation. Just a different perspective of the impact on the county budget and the impact on the budgets of businesses and residents. I'll just note, as I have said before, it's their budgets that make our budget. So if their budgets are better off and healthier, and projects are happening and investments are being made, we're likely to do better over the long term with county government. So.
Continue.
So the next impact statement is the climate assessment, which found that there'd be a minimal impact on the contribution to climate change and community resilience. I realized in writing the staff report, we talk about the community resilience piece a lot, and there's questions about why that's in the climate assessment. The idea is if you have high community resilience, a community can respond better to environmental disasters, as we've seen in the news recently. So OLO noted that since affordable housing is a component of community resilience, the increased availability of affordable housing is a positive for the climate assessment. However, if there's an increase in development, then you have increased greenhouse gas emissions from construction. And so that's how there's an overall minimal impact for the climate assessment. Next is the racial equity and social justice impact statement, which also found a minimal impact on racial equity and social justice in the county. The reason here is that changing the timing of the payments is not actually very likely to affect existing racial and ethnic disparities in the county. But something that this impact statement did note is some of the research we discussed when we were talking about the impact tax bill last year, which is that impact tax fees most likely have a negative impact on existing community members because it affects new community members, not community members already there, and that there's a lot of racial equity impacts in that. OLO did make a recommendation here that the council commission an RESJ study for the entire CIP, and that review could include how funding sources such as impact taxes are impacting racial and ethnic disparities in the county.
Councilmember Friedson?
Yeah, I think this is such an important point, and I do think that as we talk about the other broader questions about impact taxes, that this be a central part of it. But the idea of an impact tax is like an initiation fee, and it's a mentality that creates our community like a country club or like an exclusive club of some sort. The idea that we want to keep the dues for the members who are already in the club down and charge the new members a higher initiation fee to pay for the costs of things that everybody is benefiting from. That is not aligned with our broader policy priorities and is something that we really ought to think about. So I think the RESJ statement really hit on this point, and I hope that we will lift it out of this conversation as we move forward, because we're having a lot of conversations about impact taxes. Thankfully, I've been talking about this for a long time, and I'm glad that it's become a broader conversation. But that is the central aspect of that broader conversation of, who is bearing the cost and who is receiving the benefit. And the reality is everybody is receiving much of the benefits, and the costs are not being shared proportionally as a result. And that has real impacts, particularly when you look at the changing demographics of the county of who are new residents and who are existing residents, and what impacts does that have.
If I could just make a couple observations. Yep. One, I think that this is really a place where the council and the county executive are in alignment in terms of policy interests. The county executive has reiterated many times that he's not a fan of the impact taxes, especially because it is at the front end of the payment structure. But we all do recognize, as Councilmember Friedson pointed out so rightly, it is a balance between the demands and the ability of our CIP in order to support critical projects for our community, and so that is a careful balance, and we would like to see that work group that was recommended by Park and Planning, and that I know the council is eager to get off the ground before any action is taken here. I also did just want to highlight that our Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice does do an analysis of all CIP projects that fall into the categories that they select to review, and you should be seeing that analysis transmitted shortly.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the details of the bill itself, which is included in the staff report. So the bill makes changes to two sections of one section. So section 5242, again, it will strike the provisions about either paying at final inspection or the 6 or 12 months and change that to only final inspection. And then the second piece is just noting earlier in that section that payment can be deferred, because there was a bit of a conflict when you read those two provisions. So that's a bit of a cleanup that happened in the bill. One of the letters, I forget from which organization, had a question about the school impact tax, because that section's not in the bill. The reason why is if you go to the school section of the code, it just refers back to this section, so we do not actually have to change both. So I wanted to flag that both are covered, even though the bill itself is only covering the transportation section. Next is proposed amendments. So the first one is from Council President Stewart and Councilmember Katz. So the City of Gaithersburg submitted a letter, which is included in the staff report, that expresses concern that municipalities were left out of this bill. The reason being there's a different section in the code that says when a person applies to the municipality, they must show that the payment was made before getting the building permit from the municipality, which would mean if payment is deferred until final inspection, the county is saying the building can already be up, but the municipality wouldn't be allowed to say that. So what would happen with this amendment is it would allow the municipality to still issue that building permit even if the payment's not until final inspection. And then the second piece of that amendment, the language of which is on page 5, will say that the applicant should let the municipality know when they made that payment so that the municipality can mark that in their records. So that is the First Amendment.
Great. Councilmember Katz?
Thank you very much. First off, Ms. Nadeau, thank you very, very much for working with the city of Gaithersburg and I guess other municipalities as well to do this. I think the suggestion or the idea that you've come up with is for the amendment, I think works, and I appreciate you getting back in touch with the city of Gaithersburg and saying, even though we think this works, do you think this works? And from what I understand, they have agreed that this works. So I would move that we have this amendment.
We have a move and second, and since I was one of the sponsors of the amendment, I think we're good to.
I have a feeling it's going to pass. That's just where I am.
Good to go on this amendment to move forward.
All right, excellent. Thank you. So next is a question about the way that the bill is read. So the language says that the impact tax is not due until final inspection. So because attorneys love to overthink in talking to OCA about this bill, one question was, what does until mean? Does it mean minutes before the final inspection? Does it mean the day before? In talking to DPS, they will not schedule the final inspection until the payment is made. So my recommendation here from council staff on page 6 is to just say that, since that is DPS policy, that inspection will not be scheduled until payment is received, so they don't have to go through that argument with applicants.
Good.
Excellent. Any questions? No, we all agree on that one.
And then the last amendment is about the effective date. So this bill was introduced last year, and the idea was that it would affect all applications January 1, 2025 and going forward, so it was marked as expedited. Council staff still thinks the bill should be expedited, but rather than having the bill be retroactive, which is how it reads, instead it would be an expedited bill, but it would still apply to any applications since January 1.
Before we take up this amendment, if we could just talk, I think I'd like to pause and just talk about the timing of the bill, if my colleagues are okay with that. Because I think it goes back to the conversation we were having before, and that balance of what do we need for our CIP, since we just received the amended CIP from the county executive, and we started talking about that with the item before this, and when we want this to go into place to do all the things, as we said, the economic impact statement discusses. And so I guess the question I have is, I'm not sure, given that we're still working on the working group, I agree with the county exec's request to hold this until the working group, because we're still figuring that out. And I think the merits of this bill moving forward are enough that we should consider it. However, I would like us to talk about whether or not there is potential to delay the implementation of this until we are taking up the full CIP, so that way we can take into consideration what we believe may be the impacts and have that conversation when we do a full CIP versus passing the bill now and trying to have that conversation when we have the amended CIP in front of us, since we already got that from the county executive. And so I don't know if anyone has thoughts on that, but I open that up as a question of just in terms of timing and when is the best time to really look at this and work on our CIP.
Sure. I'll turn to finance for the finance questions of it. But logistically, the way that would work is you would just have the bill not be expedited, since bills are effective. The timing would work out if it wasn't expedited, that'd be, I believe it's 90 days. And so it would go into effect in May. So you might want to push the date a little bit, but for the most part, you would have reviewed the amended CIP by then, I believe.
Yeah, I'm trying to think through the logistically how that would work. I think you're suggesting that you would act and enact the bill, but with a deferred start time. So the way that we handle revenue projections, if a bill has been enacted, we do incorporate those revenue updates into the resources that are available, and so. The council would need to adjust the amended CIP to reflect the updated impact taxes to be consistent with how we handle the programming of CIP versus available resources. I think if the council were to defer action until the full CIP was under consideration next year, then we would not incorporate those revenue updates, and you would not need to, adjust the expenditure schedule in the CIP in order to align. If that, I see confused faces, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So even if we took action, say council took action on this in the next few weeks, and we said it's not going to go, we're not going to have it go into effect until this summer or when we're discussing the next CIP. You're saying finance and OMB, you all would take it into consideration even with the amended CIP?
We would, because we would be expecting to receive fewer revenues, say in fiscal 27 and 28, because we have a 6-year program and we need to balance each year of the 6-year schedule.
Got it. Okay. Councilmember Katz, and then.
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do here makes sense, though I do get concerned about the expedited part of this is that once, it's always been my understanding, is that once it goes into effect, it's right then it goes into effect. And if it's not expedited, then once it goes into effect, then we wait 90 days, 21 days. What is the...
I believe it's 90 days. So from when the council adopts it, so let's say it goes to full council mid-February, that would it would be adopted, assuming the executive signs it or however that plays out, and then that would be 90 days from there is when it would go into effect.
And I would think that what we'd want to do is to say that we're going to, however the dates work out. I mean, I like the idea of the working group. I like all of those. But once it does go into effect, that it would be that day, that next day, that it actually starts. If you're a person who's going to be building something, you don't want to say, well, now I've waited all this time and now I got to wait another 90 days. At some point, it's those hands throw up in the air and say, I can't afford to do this. So I think we do want to keep it as expedited, but I do think we want to try to have a different time frame for it. The other thing I wanted to mention, and as we went through, and I didn't, but, this whole idea that someone, once they got their building permit or whatever, that they had to pay within 6 or 12 months, anybody that's ever been involved in building, something goes wrong during those 6 and 12 months. The materials, whatever it is, don't show up, so they still had problems with this. This actually cleans up a lot of issues for us, but I think we need to make sure we're doing it the right way. Thank you.
Councilmember Friedson?
Appreciate it. Well, first of all, I really appreciate the chair and council president for what she's trying to do here. I don't agree, respectfully. It is a balance, but the ultimate goal here is to try to provide some additional flexibility, particularly with the timing, to address some of the concerns specifically related to the overwhelming amount on the front end of a project that could stop housing in particular from being built, and projects especially from penciling out. my concern here is this could have the opposite effect. If we move out the effective date, you could likely cause applicants to say, we're going to hold off and wait until July 1st of 2026 in order to file our application, which means that housing that could be built between now and then potentially won't be built between now and then, which would be the most perverse outcome of what is intended, not obviously intended by what is being put forward here for very legitimate reasons, but that concerns me a lot. I think there's room here to say whether or not it should be retroactive to an application for a building permit that was filed on or after January 1st, or whether it should just go into effect as an expedited bill so that the day that it is approved, it is in effect. I think, the certainty of filed on or after, gives a set, clear date. That makes it a little bit easier and cleaner. To Councilmember Katz's point earlier, if we want to send a clear signal to our private sector partners here who are making significant investments and need to make decisions, then having a set date on or after an application is filed is probably the easiest thing to do. It's probably the easiest thing to do for our public servants who have to have an understanding of what they're supposed to do. And I'm getting nods in the back. So, I would lean towards a hard and fast date because I just think that's cleaner, easier to communicate for public and private sector. Regardless of how anybody feels on this, I appreciate what was being intended, but I wouldn't be supportive of delaying because I think it could have a perverse impact of delaying the actual projects themselves, which is the opposite of what we all would like to see.
Thank you. All right. Well, questions were asked and answered, and I think we had, as always, a great discussion at Government Operations. So let's go back now and take up the amendment proposed by staff. Ms. Nadeau, do you want to restate that just so that we're all clear?
Yes, so the bill would be expedited and then say the amendments made in Section 1 must apply to any application for a building permit filed on or after January 1, 2025. So regardless of when the bill passes, if it passes, it will apply to applications since January 1.
Okay. Any questions specifically regarding that? No? All those in favor of that amendment? That is unanimous. Anything else? Oh, Councilmember Friedson, yeah.
If staff has anything else, I'm happy to yield.
I think I was going to say what you were going to say, so go ahead.
Okay. Well, I have dutifully spoken with staff. I'm sure that Ms. Nadeau would have said it better than I would, but she's going to allow me to try at least. An issue that has come up that's related to this issue that I have spoken with the director of DPS before and others that has come to our attention is when rates change and the time that passes, the deferral that already exists, that you have some flexibility that already exists in the code to defer impact tax payments could have a significant impact. And one of the challenges that we have heard from residents, including one resident who is building a house in Poolsville, an individual building a new home in Poolsville, they were not aware of the significant increase that deferral would cause, which changed the economics and the financing of their project and caused some real issues. This is not a sophisticated builder who does this all the time. This was an individual building a home for their family. And I had suggested that we make very clear and provide disclaimers, one, when impact taxes are going up and what those rates are as soon as we know, and two, when we provide information on deferral, that we make sure that folks are aware that the rate of the tax is due and the rate is due when it's paid. So, most people would think when you're deferring, just, common understanding, I'm deferring the bill that I have in front of me. And that's the bill that I'm going to have to pay at the time at which it's deferred under the circumstances of the deferral. That's not how it works here, and the code is clear, unfortunately, for the residents who aren't aware of this. The rate is the rate when you pay it, regardless of any other dynamics. And so nobody's doing anything wrong here. The Department of Permitting Services was following the code, which is the law. But I think we have not done a good job of providing residents and applicants with clear understanding of what the rules are in a easily digestible way. So I see Ms. Lucas is here. I just want to flag this again. I have raised it just briefly, before with the director and with others. But if you could, share with us any thoughts that you might have. I'm not suggesting we have a formal amendment here that requires language, specifically since the code is clear on what is required. And I do think the department is doing what they're supposed to do in terms of following the law. I just don't think we're communicating as well and providing information in as easily digestible format as possible, and would strongly urge the department moving forward, particularly when this change is made, but in general, to make sure that the rates, the timing of the rates, what will be charged, what the rules are clearly delineated in common language on the website and in all materials.
We generally, well, not generally, for every building permit that is issued, we print on that permit language that says this is what the impact taxes are at the time that the permit is issued. On the permit is also language that says that rates are subject to change and that the rate that you pay is the rate in effect when you pay. So that language is printed on our permit. Generally, when the rates get ready to change, we often get this question. We make a point of telling folks when permits are issued that understand the rates are going to change July 1. Maybe you want to pay them now. Maybe you want to think about what that change is going to be. And we talk through that with a lot of folks. We could certainly do a better job of doing that, and we can put more information on our website to that effect. But we do try to strongly caution folks as permits are issued that, particularly when it gets close to rate changing, that rates may change and you may be subject to a higher rate.
Yeah, I think in at least one or multiple cases, that was not the case, that it was communicated as clearly as you're saying. I think it probably happens most of the time. It doesn't seem to happen all of the time. What I'm suggesting, and I think you're hitting on this, is to institutionalize a process that isn't dependent on an individual within Department of Permitting Services having that conversation with an applicant. That we do that too. That's helpful. That human interaction, I think, is important. I wish we did more of it, quite honestly. But relying on that alone is not sufficient, because some will slip through the cracks, and those folks will feel like they were not provided the information that they needed to make the best decision for them and their families. So if we can do both, if we can add on to what you're already doing, which I very much appreciate, include language on the website as soon as the rates change to add some context to what rates subject to change means, literally. There are instances where the rates being subject to change dramatically. There are other instances where they change marginally, and so that would be a choice that somebody would have. And we'll note that this committee and the chair and I had worked hard to try to smooth out some of those huge fluctuations, because that has been a concern and a problem previously. But I just think there's an opportunity to formalize that a little bit more and to make clear so that nobody slips through the cracks. So I appreciate you responding in the way that you have. I hope that you'll continue to look at ways to do that, and we'll continue to provide feedback that we will hear from residents to try to improve. So appreciate that, and I will yield back to you, Madam Chair and President.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Lucas. do we have anything else before us?
That is all for me. Thank you.
All right. Then I will ask all those in favor on the committee of moving forward with a favorable recommendation on this bill to full council, and that is unanimous. So that will go to the full council. All right. Those are all the items we had today. I appreciate everyone being here and for their work in preparing for today. And I hope you stay warm out there. I hope you have a good rest of the day. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.